and welcome to today's discourse. This is Outside the Box Radio. I'm Alex Ansary. Thank you for subscribing here to alexansary.substack.com. Like I said, not everything is going to be on YouTube. There's going to be a lot of content on Substack, so you're going to want to make sure you're subscribed there as well. So, yes, we are on the road to hell. Some think that we're on the road to heaven. Some think that heaven is a place on earth. I beg to differ. Why were we born? What are we doing here? What is reality? What is coming next? These are things you might want to be asking yourself. Because I'm pinching myself. Because I knew this was coming. I knew this crackdown was coming. I knew this attack was coming. Not everybody did. These attacks on Muslims, even these attacks on Jews and other ethnic minorities, they come in waves. I call it the switch programming. We're seeing the rise in anti-Themism, and it's matching the themes in Hollywood. Not only in movies like Leave the World Behind, which features the Iranian threat, on cue, by the way, as Iranian steals a U.S. ship, as one of its proxies attacks U.S. ships in the Red Sea, right? We also have Top Gun. And I read the book by Val Kilmer. Unfortunately, he has throat cancer, the star of Top Gun and many other movies. And he said in the book that he was sworn to secrecy to Tom Cruise and the producers of Top Gun with regards to the plot. The plot, of course, involving Iran. Keep in mind, we've seen the largest solar flare since 2017. No, not a geomagnetic storm, but still a large solar flare nonetheless. And I've said multiple times how what we're really dealing with is a sun that affects us, whether there's a geomagnetic storm or not. And it seems that the leading scientists of the world would rather you be ignorant of this fact. But scientists will admit, some of them, that we're affected by the solar flares, but they're still in the dark as to how these things are connected with world events. So as we head towards April 2024, my advice to you is to direct your consciousness towards what you can do to empower your life, whether that means increased productivity on one level or another. For me, it's content creation. It's my writing goals. It's even some mini documentaries. Nothing too complex, nothing too highly produced. But documentaries that take some of these complex topics that I've been discussing for years and summarizes the most important points in, say, 1 to 2 hours, right? So you may look back on your life at periods in which you were more productive, in periods in your life in which it seems that things were moving a little bit more slowly. I can feel the energy rising within myself, as in the last couple of years, as we have been coming out of this solar minimum. And now that we're moving into solar maximum, with a peak expected this year leading into next year, expect to see more insanity on this planet. But most of all, be forearmed with the information as to how we're affected by these changes. So you don't become adversely affected as well and end up automatically reacting to somebody's rage or anger like a zombie. And that's what a lot of people are today that don't have self-control. There's a lot of different zombies, many flavors of zombies that are alive on the planet at this time. Many different causal factors for developing the zombie-like consciousness. Many people think that they are free of the zombie apocalypse programming or influence, as they point their finger at the normies, the sheeple, the so-called regular folks, right? But I beg to differ there as well. Everybody's been affected by some of these dark energies. And so when the sun is more active, there are certain energies that are activated. It's not just the changes that are taking place in the human being, at the brain level, at the hormonal level, that may cause them to act out and explode, okay? It could also be in the way in which these solar energies activate the spiritual parasites in this world. As the sun gives us life, it also gives life, I suspect, and I've been saying for years, to those unseen forces that prey on us. By the way, here's a reason why I think that you should explore the Islamic interpretation of the jinn. And I've given you some recommended sources in the past as far as YouTube channels, like one particular Sufi. The reason is because there is a much more detailed explanation of the jinn than Christianity and even Gnosticism. That does not make me a member of any religion, however, because I do believe in the God-given power of discernment. And discernment is something that we can lose, and discernment is something that we can get back. It's something that comes and goes like the moon cycle, like the eclipses. There's going to be periods in our life in which we have more discernment than other times. So it comes and goes. And I believe that the more moral you are, the more ethical you are, the more good deeds that you attempt to do, the more you attempt to serve God and not yourself, the higher the level of discernment that you are going to have. If those are your intentions, to serve God, not mammon, and you hold true to those intentions, like I'm recommending that you do now as we go into this year. So as you keep that in your psyche, you may become aware of the traps of this world. Okay, there's another phrase that comes to mind, and that is you need to untrap yourself. We all need to untrap ourselves. Have you heard of a limiter? It's the idea of, and we're talking about automobiles, a limiter on an automobile, some sort of a device or technology that is installed in cars to prevent them from driving over a certain mile per hour. So, as biological slaves in this earthly matrix, even though some of us are powerful souls, we all have our own limiter as well in this fallen world. Some want to know why God would allow these demons, these archons, these jinn, these unseen forces to exist. I would say that this world that we're living in which we live alongside these creatures, these forces of darkness, we have many opportunities for growth that may not exist in hell. Earth may be a place, unlike hell, where some souls get a chance to advance themselves, to advance themselves, to advance their souls. Whereas others, they come to Earth and they become more corrupted. You know, so it is very much a create your own reality type of a realm. And perhaps some people manifest in the form of a demon after they leave human form, some sort of a demon zombie, and they may come to haunt humanity that they were previously a member of. You know, so there's different ways you can go when it comes to the afterlife. But the afterlife does matter, right? And I've come to this awareness recently. And so it was interesting as I was seeing the increase in the demonization of Muslims recently in recent months, as the switch programming turned back on, I saw them demonized for their belief in the hereafter. As one Fox News guest kept saying over and over and over, they're a death cult. They don't believe in life. They believe in death. They're working for the hereafter, which is a complete misinterpretation of an entire religion. Let me ask you a question. Would you want there to be discrimination against all white people because of some Nazis or because of some slave owners or because of some racists? Now, I don't really need to play the Jeopardy theme here, do I? You know what the answer is. The answer is no, it's not justified because of the actions of some white people. You know this in your heart. You know this in your mind. You know this in your blood. But yet, this is the state of affairs in our modern day and age. We are taught to be hypocrites. So while people want respect for themselves, people don't want to be judged individually because of the actions of others. But that's exactly what's happening to these people around the world. Back to China and this Uyghur autonomous area, although not so autonomous anymore, with the Han Chinese that are moving into that region, they blamed all the Uyghurs They blame their very ethnicity after the 2009 attacks, in which some Uyghurs went on a assault spree with batons and knives and things of that nature. But it's like the situation with Hamas and Israel and the events that are alleged to have happened October 7th, 2023. Q bono, who benefits? Do the Palestinian people benefit from what Israel or what Hamas, that Freudian slip there, what Hamas started on the 7th of October? Who benefits, Israel or the Palestinians? Where is the greatest death toll? And where is the United States recognizing this death toll? And is the United States going to also be brought up by the World Court in the near future or the distant future because of its actions now in Israel and actions that it may engage in later? Right? So I want to echo some of my predictions that I've had over the years, that we would see the whole world turn against the U.S. and or Israel, especially the U.S. And some people think the U.S. is Israel. I don't look at things strictly biblical. I'm kind of outside that box, although I do appreciate some biblical teachings in Scripture. But I will say for years that I've suspected that the major events that are going to go down in America, in a continent this large, involving multiple superpower nations. And this obsession, this deep obsession with end times prophecy and Israel, to a certain extent, has been a distraction. Doesn't mean that there's nothing that's going to happen in Israel, right? Certain things are going to happen, but it's the U.S. where some major things are going to go down, where there's a massive population. And I don't think people have really speculated deeply enough, as to why they've weaponized immigration. And they brought so many people here to America to likely, I would say, suffer in the future. Not prosper, as some people think they're being brought here to prosper. I think that is the deception. Nobody's going to be prospering in a situation in which these groups are being blamed by a series, I repeat, a series of false flags. They will be hated, and politicians will call for either their roundup and or deportation, and possibly even their supporters. This type of rhetoric is already taking place, with Trump saying that any supporters of Hamas would be kicked out of the country. Now, if we look at the supporters of Hamas, we do see a number of them in BLM and protest groups. Comic book strip, which was created in 2009 or 10 by, I believe, the London Guardian. Clyde Lewis talked about this as well. And a white van featuring some sort of solar logo or symbolism on the van was involved in a number of detonations of a dirty bomb or attack in various U.S. cities, including Portland, Oregon. By the way, I haven't heard from anyone in Portland, Oregon as of yet. But because Portland is on the West Coast, and other factors, the Willamette River leading to the Columbia River and the Columbia River leading to the Pacific Ocean, and the history of Shanghaiing in that region of men. And also there's a history of kidnapping and trafficking of women through that region, not only in Portland, but I-5. Not just the West Coast. We see this rising throughout the U.S., so it's not just the West Coast that would be at risk. Obviously, New York would be as well, perhaps Miami. I documented in 2012 how it would be in Tampa Bay, Florida, prior to the RNC in 2012, which featured Ron Paul and I believe Mitt Romney. And I did travel to that RNC in Tampa in 2012. There's videos on my channel, my original channel. They engage in a drill, the powers that be, the U.S. and other governments, in some sort of a drill in which they rescue the mayor of Tampa from terrorists. And it involved troops from countries around the world over, I believe the stated amount, it seems ridiculous, but the stated amount was over 60 or 70 countries, maybe even up to 90 countries. It was like a large number that was given in the report that I heard at the time. And the event was profiled on the NATO YouTube channel. Chris Matthews of MSNBC was doing a live stream. Live there in Tampa Bay, Florida in 2012, right outside one of the entrances to the RNC itself. There was an area where there was a lot of kind of like a beer garden area where there was a lot of beverages and food being sold and people sitting in chairs. And I'm not a fan of the Oath Keepers, just so you know, and the far right. But back in those days, I did interview a few Oath Keepers because I liked at the time what they stood for. Most especially the fact that they were Stuart Rhodes, raising the alarm about the potential foreign troops being used in the U.S. So that caught my attention in light of the research that I've been doing into China and Russia and my interview with Leon the Gaunt. So that's why I asked Chris Matthews at the time why he called out Stuart Rhodes when Stuart Rhodes claimed that there were drills or exercises that have involved foreign troops. And Chris Matthews says, what foreign troops? You know, to kind of put him on the spot on the air live, what foreign troops? And so when I saw Chris Matthews, I got loud with my voice and said, hey, Chris Matthews, you remember when you asked Stuart Rhodes such and such, and you asked what foreign troops? Where, well, newsflash, dude, you're sitting in a town in which they had many countries engage in a foreign troop exercise to rescue the mayor from terrorists. So you're asking, what foreign troops, dude? Like, seriously. And it was also in that same year of 2012 in which I made a video with someone who was into Oath Keepers content. He also got duped into far-right content, so we later stopped connecting online, which is not a surprise, but it is the sign of the times. We talked in 2012 about a drill that took place in Colorado that featured the Russians in Colorado in some sort of a drill near Fort Collins, working with U.S. troops and being seen in pictures looking at what appears to be some sort of militarized drone. On top of that, we have Far Cry 5, the violent shoot-'em-up video game, which features some sort of a Montana off-grid cult, in which the game player is, of course, going after this cult with guns and other weapons. Again, it's a shoot-'em-up game similar to Call of Duty, but instead of it being Iraqis or some sort of Middle Eastern city or town, and I find those types of games to be sick and demonic and clearly satanic, including people that enjoy those games. So we've seen the progression of them making the Iraqi enemy the one that you shoot up to the off-gridder being the one that the player shoots up. But it's all justified because they're a cult. And yes, cults exist, but anyone trying to live in freedom away from the government, away from utilities, away from the grid, using solar, and in some cases not sending their kids to public school, yeah, they're going to be seen as people that have the cult mindset, unfortunately. And the fake news and the disinformation that I've talked about for years is our enemy. Never forget that. Never defend fake news and disinformation and algorithmic manipulation, because it's there to ultimately destroy us and to demonize us. They've made conspiracy theory really easy to get into, really easy to start smoking up, and like it's crack. And in some ways, dealing with some conspiracy people, it can feel like you're dealing with a tweaker or a meth head. That doesn't mean that's you, but you know what I mean. They have manufactured in so many ways for the mainstream conspiracy content consumer and creator to basically act like they are a caricature of themselves. Whether it be examples like Alex Jones or others, right? They've made it popular. Keep this in mind. They've made it popular and socially acceptable to be a friggin' liar on this planet. We look at people that obsess on a narrative that the sun is dying. There's a grand solar minimum, just like one guy that I met in Pagosa Springs, Colorado. Haven't talked much about this guy because he's a super creep. He has his own YouTube channel, and all he does is talk about the sun dying. never talks about how the sun influences humankind, and attacked me for my work, which was really suspect. That's a really suspect experience, to come across another solar researcher and to meet them when they don't even have their own channel. To be suffering and suffering and suffering to get the word out as to how we're affected by the solar flares. Then I meet one guy who believes that the sun is dying, that we're going to see massive crop failures from a grand solar minimum, who doesn't believe or see how we're affected by the solar flares, or the connection to the unrest or the wars. And this guy, like others, developed, unfortunately, for a period in time, I believe it's past, but maybe it hasn't, an unhealthy obsession with me and everything that I was saying. And I'm telling you, that is a wake-up call in a world of so many psychopaths that I think can be affected by these evil spirits. I'm looking at this book here, An Exorcist Explains the Demonic, the Antics of Satan and His Army of Fallen Angels. I want to extract some valuable information from this as well. When I met him and I talked about the influence of the archons, he said, what? He thought it was strange that I brought up this term, the archons. Later on, he's interviewing a guy named Robert Bruce about the archons. When I pushed this guy out of my life, I was criticizing marijuana one day. I think marijuana is great, but sometimes I feel like criticizing the zombie apocalypse that comes from some smokers that don't do anything with their high. You know, just so you're on the level and you know how I feel about things. So sometimes, you know, I will go on a rant as to how sometimes I think they want us all stoned and stupid. And one time I went on a rant like that on Facebook, and he snapped at me because he was a pot dealer, and that insulted his ego. And I got tired of his attitude, and I blocked him. And I don't want to have anything to do with him for a number of reasons. I'm not going to get into all of them. Then he sends me a long email saying that I'm a conspiracy theorist, that my information on my website is fake, and that I better take down those videos that feature him, in which I interviewed him. And of course, when I feature him on my channel, and he's talking about a solar minimum, grand solar minimum, 10,000 views, 20,000 views, kind of odd. Whereas my videos only get like a few hundred. I'm glad to say with this new channel that we're getting almost 100 views per video on a new channel that's only a few months old. So we'll stay here on this new channel. What I'm saying to you is, when a man works hard, let me give you an analogy, and we'll go to a break. We're going to bring you some music from Laserhawk. It is called Fight to the Top. It's something that motivates me to work out, to go walking, to think about things. So if you're going to spend your time building a home, building a foundation, building a business, you know, if there's a hurricane or there's a major disturbance or people come and they vandalize your business, it can be devastating. Some people don't recover from those types of disasters. We've dealt with our own types of disasters that can be comparable to a natural disaster taken out of business when it comes to how the algorithms have changed, how they have shadow banned so many of us, and how we see so many types of hate and disinformation and political division and violence promoted by these algorithms. And so where we're going to go from here, I don't know, but it's not going to get any easier. If you want to see my work grow, then I need your help reaching the masses. I need to get my podcast on Spotify. Some of this I need to do on my own, but I could also use some volunteers because 2024 is going to be a significant year. And my advice to you is, if you're a content creator, or if you're a creative mind, or a writer, to use this powerful time that's coming in to share your message that you may have. I have multiple goals for this year, but I also think that by having multiple goals and not just having it hammered down to one or two goals, you know, my energy is kind of all over the place. You know, so I'm trying to hammer it down, you know, but it is a goal of mine to take some of my most important points that I'm trying to get across, the points that I'm making about the switch programming, anti-themism, the manipulation of the algorithms, how both the left and the right often come together over the ethnicities that they are taught to hate. And this includes CNN, right? As a CNN anchor calls the attacks on Gaza, And that's Fight to the Top by Laser Hawk. And that's exactly what we need to be doing as well. Fighting to the top for our lives, for our very soul. So here's my advice to you. Turn off the people that are brainwashing you. Turn off the people that aren't doing shit to wake up this reality. Call them out if they have the ability to call them out. Call out the unconsciousness in your community. Buy a megaphone in the event of an emergency in which you need to help people evacuate, and hopefully you know where to evacuate in the event of something hitting the fan. So yes, people are being brainwashed now for Iran to attack the United States, for Hamas to invade the United States through the southern border. Don't forget now that China owns a lot of property down there at the Mexico-Texas border. Some of my predictions over the years haven't included Alex Jones and other figures in the far right, but just generally how they're weaponizing the far right in general, and how they can even weaponize the far left through their Occupy style protests, in which they call for cities to be occupied. The odd statement that we heard from protesters for years: Occupy Portland, Occupy New York. Why would you want to call for your city to be occupied? Especially in a day and age in which we're moving closer to World War III. A lot of people hashtagging World War III on Twitter, right? But this is nothing new. When people automatically just call World War III without it automatically being World War III, it kind of waters down the message, and people just kind of stop listening. And where we're at right now in 2024 is where I thought where we would be at, that we would be at this type of a point, where people wouldn't want to hear about it anymore, where they wouldn't want to hear about the skirmishes, the close calls between the fighter jets, between the Russians and the U.S. and the Chinese, that it would become all too common. Chinese spy balloons flying over the U.S., China hacking into the Americans' emails via Microsoft, the FAA being hacked and going down. It all becoming so normal, and then it being involved in so many plots on Netflix and Amazon Prime featuring the cyber attack theme. Like I said, one actually did include China, which is rare, not common but rare, and that is Red Dragon Rising. That is 2013, around the same time period that the Red Dawn remake came out, in which the Chinese pressured the makers of the movie to change the enemy using computer graphics to the North Koreans. There's another movie coming out that is called Civil War. It is coming out in April 2024. Just a reminder, we've seen lots of trailers for movies like this that go back years and years and years. There is one called The Gray State Project, and it is a situation which, in that case, the content creator of that documentary of the government. We can look at these movies now, these dystopian movies that I've talked about on streaming video content platforms, and I have a longer podcast on that on Substack, where this is going. As this has music, it's not going to YouTube. So make sure you're signed up to Substack. So they are deliberately contaminating the minds of the human populations with all types of dystopian realities and potentials. And some of them have strong potentials when they involve the sun, when they involve space, when they involve aliens. So they play on a human imagination. So instead of people really questioning what they're doing here on Earth, what is really going on here on Earth, as Mark Passio says, one on Earth is happening. I featured Mark Passio in a recent video on my channel with his discussions on the sun. Instead of people asking those deep dive questions into the nature of reality, they let movies shape their imagination and embed various subliminal messages within it. And I'll also add, there's a number of movies about human trafficking now on these platforms. Like I said, I warned about it getting worse years ago before these movies came out. As it got worse, now all these movies are out that show human trafficking in the plot, but it's all fear. With a little bit of questionable content also in some of those movies. Some of the movies seem to have fetishized the abuse of women or the kidnapping of women. And as I said, that is now popular in adult content, right? Do you really think it's an accident that anyone can access content that depicts human trafficking? So I don't think it's an accident which is why I've been warning for years that women in the future, in the event of a collapse, in the event of not having good men in their life, in the event of being in an area that's overtaken by criminals, whether or not it's invaded by a superstate nation isn't the issue. It's whether or not certain areas fall. And while some people are looking forward to the idea of collapse, and I understand why, it has to do with U.S. imperialism, it has to do with the police state, it has to do with the immoral collection of taxation or taxes in this society, the unconscious also use of those tax dollars, as a lot of those tax dollars go to killing brown people around the world. A lot of people know this. So in order for brown people around the world to stop being killed with U.S. tax dollars, it's sad. It's really sick. And in fact, it seems like the solution, at least in some people's eyes, is for the U.S. to fall. That's not what I want to see happen, because when that happens, as you know, the poor get even poorer. It's not going to be a good time for people that are already suffering. That's what we're being led into. That's the role that Russia today was there to play, by the way. As many Americans in the 2000s looked towards RT and their propaganda for guidance, and all they did was engaging in the airing of our dirty laundry. It was obvious that that was the case. And knowing Russians' involvement in Afghanistan, Russia's involvement, and their unconscious activities elsewhere, and Putin's involvement with the KGB while it was the Soviet Union. It was easy all these years, from day one, for me to see Russia as part of the system. Russia and China as part of the system. Not outside the system, but a part of the system. Now they're calling for a new world order. Iran, years ago, called for a new world order. How deep are they into this system? It's not a stretch of the imagination to see Iran as a large nation, larger than other Arab nations or Persian nations, they're Persians, positioned to attack the U.S. as it's allied with Russia and China. It's been brought into their world, the Eastern Bloc, for years. Okay, we have many Eastern Bloc. We have the BRICS. There's the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Okay, there is the joint naval exercise that we saw recently between China and Russia, involving both of them near Alaska. We have mainstream reports saying that if we are invaded by Russia, that they're going to go after Alaska. What that would look like for the off-gridders living in Alaska, I'm not sure. But this is not something new for Alaska to be discussed. I have an uncle in Alaska that years ago worked for the military in some capacity. By the way, I've never been close to this uncle. As far as I'm concerned, he's not a good guy. But for years, this uncle of mine operated cranes that loaded, I believe, missiles into missile silos directly for the U.S. government. He also operated a crane that helped build the Big Pink, also known as the U.S. Bank Corp Tower in downtown Portland off the corner of 6th and Burnside. Yeah, I would say that this is a very strange reality. And that, people don't understand that more anger, more aggression, more violence is not the answer. More death is not the answer. More genocide is not the answer. More concentration camps is not the answer. More prisons aren't the answer. We have many people, many of our fellow countrymen and women, that are being brainwashed that more draconian measures are the answer. Study China. Study how they brainwash them to go along with the persecution of their own people and ethnic minorities. Be honest with what is taking place in Russia. Many people think that Russia is a beacon of free speech because it has some conservative values, but look at what they do to their own people. When there are protests against Putin in Russia and people are disappeared, why would people glamorize this? Anyway, there's a music video that I have, an idea that I have regarding Portland, Oregon. And it features the music to this next song, and it would go along with photographs of old Portland in the 1970s. And you might think about your city in the 1970s and the 1980s. I have a lot to say about this period in time. Some people get deep into conspiracy theories like donut associate of Chris Green of AMTV, where he talks about the Masonic influence over disco, I almost find that to be laughable. But maybe there has been an agenda to manipulate that generation, because when you think about those people that were born in the late 70s and early 80s, there's something about that generation. There is something special. Not that it's better than other generations. That's not what I'm saying. There's something about that generation that was born in the late 70s, 80s, that seems to be socially engineered for something. But there's something also spiritual about this generation also. So it seems like this generation's been targeted towards the dark side, which is why this generation, as they turn toward at 18, 19, 20 years of age, many of them experienced the 9/11 event, and they were of age to go into the military. So as you know and should know, and if you don't know, well, now you know. And you'll know in the future when I write a longer essay on it, which you have not read, but I've talked about it. How my life has been affected by 9/11, how I was called the enemy of America on the day of 9/11 because of my father's heritage, even though my mother's white and I've never been outside this country. And now with the events happening, they have a lot of people concerned about Palestinians and anyone looking Palestinian. My life now is not exactly paradise where I currently reside. Having said that, that's how I got involved in all this. Seeing how the 9/11 event directly affected my life and how people around the world that looked like me were affected in certain countries around the world that I knew in my heart were not involved in carrying out that attack. And while it's been comforting on some level to see some people involved in questioning that day, it's also been so sad to see people that question that day not understand that it's by design for all these immigrants to be pushed from their land and to be demonized and to face great hardship. The 1970s, a time before 9/11, a time before weaponized immigration, a time before the expansion of the police state, a time before Chinese-Russian war games, a time before cell phones, before the internet, a time when people actually had to get to know each other in person before they decided that they hated one another, right? A time in which things were done in person. A time before the screens ruled all. Yeah, I want to thank those supportive emails that have come in over the last few weeks. I'm going to read something now from this book that I'm holding in my hand. I have a number of books that I've checked out from the library. This is An Exorcist Explains the Demonic. So while it would be popular for me to present myself as a member of only one faith, I also think that would bring attacks on me as well. I think that it's better for me to use the discernment that I have and continue to learn from different books and different sources. So this is a prayer for deliverance as we are in the eye of the storm, in between eclipses, and things are going to get more intense from here on out as we get closer to April. Again, look at world events taking place internationally, nationally, and locally in your community. So this is a prayer for deliverance. And then we'll read a page from A Timeless Reality, a book by a Sufi. So we have a little bit of spirituality from both sources. And in the future, I'll be talking a little bit more about the spiritual side of Islam based on some of the literature that I'm reading. So you're informed, so you know what the actual belief systems are, as opposed to being told that they all believe XYZ violent, psychotic ideology, when in fact, no, that's not the truth. And many people question the origins of this ISIS, ISIL groups operating now in the Middle East. So, my Lord, you are all-powerful. You are God. You are Father. We beg you through the intercession and help of the archangels Michael, Raphael, and Gabriel for the deliverance of our brothers and sisters who are enslaved by the evil one. All saints of heaven come to our aid. From anxiety, sadness, and obsessions, we beg you, free us, O Lord. From hatred, fornication, envy, we beg you, free us, O Lord. From thoughts of jealousy, rage, and death, we beg you, free us, O Lord. From every thought of suicide and aberration, we beg you, free us, O Lord, from any form of sinful sexuality. We beg you, free us, O Lord, from every division in our family and every harmful friendship. We beg you, free us, O Lord, from every sort of evil spell, malfice, witchcraft, and every form of occult. We beg you, free us, O Lord. Lord, you who said, I leave you peace, my peace I give you, grant that through the intercession of the Virgin Mary, we may be liberated from every evil spell and enjoy your peace always. In the name of Christ our Lord, amen. Okay. It can be difficult, by the way, to honor our mother and father if we had a difficult childhood. When my father's gone, however, I will honor him by sharing with you the intelligent words that I noted that he shared on Facebook regarding geopolitics, the situation in Afghanistan, and a great deal of knowledge about his culture and his life history, right? So while my dad and I aren't talking deeply, he did wish me a Happy New Year. I did receive a card in the mail from Bruce. Bruce, I don't know if you're listening. Let me know somehow if you are listening. I do care about you, and I'm happy for you that you do live in a good part of Oregon at this time. You are better situated, right? So my mother can tell you this if she's listening, right? But I wish you well, and I think that you're well positioned in the area that you're in, Oregon, for what is to come. But pay attention to what's happening with China and this purchase of 200,000 acres in Central Oregon, in and around Bend. That's actually where Zoe Ansary, a distant relative of mine, lives. I talked about her TikTok channel recently. I would really recommend that you look at the spiritual side of Islam so that you understand that a lot of these radical groups aren't real Muslims, and that you understand that some of these radical groups and governments around the world that are Islamic, that do oppress their own people, they share close acquaintances with both Russia, the US, and China. While innocent, non-radicalized Muslims suffer and are falsely accused of being terrorists, again, by the real terrorists. Okay? Do you understand what's happening? Do you see what I see? Let me find something from a timeless reality. Okay, there's a lot of wisdom here. Okay, so, of course, in their religion, their word for God is Allah. And the material world of the matrix is called dunya. Okay, so, and Allah doesn't care for dunya, the material world. So it means that in our world of light, we should always be accompanying them. So it's not something that we do only once a year when we go to visit them, but that was the whole concept of the spiritual connection. It's that to bring their light into my life, to always be with that light. And that from these talks in the last few nights is that we said that we found Allah, and everything is now reflective reality. When Allah wanted to be found, we were listening or searching in Islam, and we came to La Ali Allah, leave everything but Allah, and make the zikr, divine remembrance of Allah. And in this journey for the love of Allah, Allah introduced us to Muhammad and put within our hearts Muhammad Rasulullah. Okay, when Allah loves his servant and guides the servant, he puts a love in their heart for where he is. Like hide and go seek, I'm here. He doesn't want two hearts where you'll be searching, from here to the moon. He keeps inspiring within our hearts, I'm here. So I'm going to conclude with this. I'm going to share more from him later. I think that they have demonized the use of the word Allah through the manufacturing of various radical groups. And they have been controlling these groups for a number of years. If you look at these countries like Afghanistan and others, they have been affected from the outside for a long, long time, from either the British or the other Europeans. And there's a reason why the Middle East is in turmoil at this time. So we need to be willing to to sacrifice, as far as I'm concerned, our pleasures in this world, our conveniences in this world, and do the right thing and speak these truths, right? Because it's being done for humanity. Most people don't want to sacrifice that. Okay. They're too obsessed with, how much money they're going to be making, how many partners or sexual partners they're going to get, because society tells them that's important, how many material things they get, how many vacations they go on, instead of finding a way to be spiritually at peace with where they are, right? And nowadays, like, there's so many ways in which people are getting sucked deeper and deeper and deeper into the matrix. So to me, these are spiritual times, as I said in a recent video, which is why we see the wars launched and the conflicts launched and the economic collapses and the other forms of strife, from racial strife to classism to others. Okay, because they want to distract us from what we actually should be doing with our lives and our energy. Okay, we are here to be creators. We're not necessarily here to be creators of certain technologies or computers or products, as in factory workers or workers, say, at a McDonald's, something to that effect. No, we're meant to be more than wage slaves. And I would say that's going to be quite the practical joke on the population if, in fact, the U.S. ends up collapsing and social services end up collapsing and welfare ends up collapsing and retirement ends up going away. In that type of a situation, people are not going to be happy for a number of reasons. And there's going to be a lot of contemplation that they're going to be having at that moment, in which, whether it's an economic collapse or an EMP or a complete takeout of our grid, there's going to be people in a lot of contemplation as to how they live their lives, what they did with their lives. Their lives, in some cases, will flash before their eyes. And some people are going to need to think about in the future, as these things happen, the people that they harassed, the people that they mocked, the people that they laughed at, as they said to themselves, these things will never happen. The sun will never humble our reality. Our country will never be invaded. Robots will never take over. So on and so forth. Everybody's got an argument for how this world is so stable and so sane, but it's not. We were given some sort of a golden ticket, as far as I'm concerned, by being born human at this point in time. There are so many things to cover. There are so many things to expose. And who else is going to do the exposing? Your cat? Your dog? Your fish? Your horse? Huh? If we are the ones that are coming to a certain awareness that things are the way that they are, then we have a responsibility to stand up to that evil and to expose that evil. And sometimes that's going to require sacrifice, right? You may not be popular more.